All right, I think we can turn this thing on. I figured it out.
It's alive. It's alive.
We're recording. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm okay, all things considered.
Absolutely.
So, by the way, just people are interested, what you're listening to right now is the Talky podcast, where we talk about the worlds of sales and marketing and technology, business strategy, a little bit of entrepreneurship on the side, how all these things interact with one another. You can find us online at talkytalkypod.com and everywhere that the finest podcasts are consumed. Trigger warning, there may be an occasional cuss word. It happens. It is not the core theme of this program, but occasionally it happens.
This is less of a trigger warning and more of a just a public service notice to Mike. Yeah. It's not the core, Mike, of why you're here. You're not here just to let out your anger with F-bombs.
Well, I don't know about that. Hey, so he's Mike Slack, by the way, and you can find him on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/slackmike, linkedin.com/in/slackmike. I put all of my reindeer games and nonsense on Twitter at Jake Fisher, JakeFisher. Mike, what are you reading right now?
I'm reading the same book I was reading last time, which is called Stumbling on Happiness, which is a book I read probably 10 years ago or so, and I'm rereading right now with a book club of mine. And one of the things that's really interesting right now that I just read a day or two ago was about what he talks about in this book, Harvard psychologist, and how what we think about happiness is wrong oftentimes. And one of the things he talks about is measuring happy experiences. And he talks about what is called the experience stretching hypothesis, which says or suggests that if two people are given the same thing and they experience it and it provides them happiness, and they even use the same words to describe their happiness, the actual level of happiness might be different. It might be far different. So let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, Jake, you and I are both given a chocolate cake, and we both say, I love this chocolate cake. Even though we both say, I love it, you might actually love it so much. It's your favorite cake in the world, your best frosting, hits your taste buds just right. And on a scale of 1 to 10, it might be a 9, right? For me, I love that cake, but it's not as good as cherry pie. It's probably a 5 for me, right? And so the experience stretching hypothesis, meaning just because we use the same words, they don't necessarily have the same meaning. So I find that interesting. I don't know if you find that interesting, but the next part that is interesting to me, and possibly of interest to our audience, is how this applies to sales conversations, right? Because oftentimes I work in the technology space, the enterprise integration space. People use the right coded jargon, right? They say words and phrases about the kinds of things that we do. And they say, I want to move as fast as possible, right? Or they say, I want to be API led, or they say, I want to have reusable assets, right? They use all these words that mean something specific. And if you are too excited, and you might say, oh, they're using a coded word that I know, I'm going to jump right in because I'm sure their use of that coded word is the exact same thing as my use of that coded word because it's one of the special in words. But one of the things that I try to do when I'm not getting too excited is slow down and say, I understand you're using this particular phrase. That can mean different things to different people. Here's what that means to me. Is that what it means to you, or does it mean something different, right? Slowing down and verifying and clarifying all these coded words. So reading that book and reading this experience of, you can describe the same thing with the same words, but actually mean something different. Yeah. And what is that thing you actually mean? That's what we have to get into if we're going to help solve a problem.
I think that's really smart. And it's a good reminder that in a lot of circumstances in a sales situation, really the important things, like the keys to selling is, if there is such a thing, is less about what we say and really more about what we ask. Like, hey, can we unpack that a little bit? What do you mean by as soon as possible? Like, because there are certain circumstances where as soon as possible means you can get it is I can retask all of my people. It's going to cost 5 times what it normally would. I can do that,
Right.
Like, is that what you mean?
Right.
Hey, something else I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, you have these conversations like on the as soon as possible thing, right? Okay, if we sign papers tonight, how soon could you have somebody ready for me, right? Along those lines. It's like, well, based on my experience, right? Because they want you excited, they can get the business, right? Mm-hmm. Based on my experience, I've heard that several times, and we're on our second conversation. We don't have an NDA in place. We don't have an MSA in place. You haven't sent me your list of requirements, and I walk through all the steps, and maybe in their mind, they're like, I've got to solve this problem. I'm going to do it right now, tomorrow. And then you walk through all those procedural steps and like, oh, you know what? 4 weeks out is probably feasible if we signed something today, right? Which we wouldn't even be able to sign something today, right?
Right.
But anyways, yeah.
Well, and I think that also that's a test. I think sometimes sophisticated buyers, especially in the B2B space, which we're really both in, they want to test to see, are you just trying to get a deal done? Or are you actually trying to get the best thing for me? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that, the rookie salespeople are just like enthusiastic about, oh my God, you're stolen buying signals, got to close the deal now, whatever, and you can't do that. It's got to be really the deal, whatever you're putting together has to be the best thing for them, but it's got to work for us too. That's kind of the way I think about it. Is like, we need the best thing for you, but if we're going to do business with you, it's got to work for us too.
Right. And I hear you saying you want to go fast, but on this particular issue, but everything else I've heard you say has been about quality and why you need to change vendors, and it's about quality and the person with the right skills. So if you need someone with the right skills, it's going to take us a minute to validate that the person we're going to put on your project. So you got to verify and clarify, right?
Yeah,
is it really more important to go fast or to get the right person, get the right quality? Yeah.
So there's another thing that pops into my head about this, and it is important in the sales process, especially with I think newer salespeople potentially, and that is, people tend to describe things in a way that is socially acceptable. We really sometimes everybody does this. We'll just flat out lie to not hurt someone's feelings. Mm-hmm. And as a salesperson, we have to rat that stuff out, to suss that stuff out and figure it out, because what we're trying to accomplish, like if they're like, people don't want to be rude to a salesperson. You don't want to be like, what, this is not even where, like, this is not like, no, nobody wants to say just no. I prefer somebody that's like, Jake, no. And I'm like, cool. Okay. Well, let's dig deeper into that, so I think that kind of the white lie, not wanting to hurt people's feelings, especially when it comes to really ferreting out hidden objections.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. It's okay for you to say no, right? Yeah. Actually, it's preferred if you say no now, right? If you already know. And I did that recently with a prospect that I was pretty sure wasn't interested. I was like, listen, you don't have to say, we'll talk again after you go through this again. If we're not a good fit, just, let me know. And they told me, well, that's not it at all. Actually, there's this other thing we're trying to work through. Great. Thank you very much. Is there anything I can do to help with that?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's perfect. I have a thing I do oftentimes, and I don't do it every time if I already know that the prospect I'm in front of is qualified. But oftentimes what I do, I've got basically 5 questions right up front. One of the very first things I say in a very, very first call, like we call it a connect call, like is there basic potential for a fit, for alignment? As they say, alignment between the companies. Can we help them? Are we a good fit for a vendor? And one of the things, so I go through these 5 questions, and it's literally, do you meet these 5 criteria? It has to do with the situation they're in, what kind of business they're in, and what they sell, their industry, what their goals are. And so, like, if they can answer yes to all 5, then we move on. But if they say no to one of them or more, I'm like, we're not gonna be a good fit. Yeah. And we're just done. Like, that's it. But oftentimes it's always ended with, but here are 3 other vendors that you might want to look at for what you're trying to make happen. We're not the one.
Yeah.
And boy, people really seem to appreciate that, because it's like, when you get that done in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the call, man, you didn't waste my time. Like, and you got me on my way. And if it ever turns out that I do meet those 5 criteria, you're damn sure, well, I'm going to call you, because you're just straight up about it. So,
right. Absolutely.
I'm getting fired up. Sorry.
That's good.
Stuff I care about,
Absolutely. What are you reading? Anything these days?
I'm rereading actually a great book. It's not really business related. It's called Once Minutos, or 11 Minutes, by the author Paulo Coelho. He's a Brazilian writes in Portuguese. I like to read him in Spanish, I think mainly just because the Spanish is closer to the Portuguese than English is. This book, Once Minutos or 11 Minutes, wasn't really his big kind of groundbreaking popular book. It was another book before that he wrote called The Alchemist. If you're familiar, if you guys ever heard, that was the big one, Alchemist. Huge hit by this author, Paulo Coelho. And so one of the big themes of this book of the Alchemist was that there's a couple of them, but one is that fear is oftentimes a bigger obstacle than whatever obstacle that you're afraid of. Like that's a big one. And that's a big deal about, I think, for rookie salespeople, because that is essentially, I think, the biggest killer of a young salesperson's career is call reluctance. The reluctance to actually make that outreach as a salesperson and attempt to start a relationship, to get to know someone, to make that first call. Nobody likes cold calls. I don't like cold calls. There are some weird guys that like cold calls, and like I just try to stay away from them because I don't know, they're gonna get my wallet or something. But that's a big one, is the fear. Like if you understand, like the fear of whatever is out there is really the thing that's hurting you. The obstacle out there is not a big deal. The worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to throw you out of their office. If you're in a call, they're going to throw you out. Big deal. Like it's happened to me, like you're not a real salesperson in the B2B space unless you've been ejected from somewhere.
Well, and even right now, if they throw you out of their office, well, you're in your bedroom already.
Exactly.
Right? So
all they can do is just hang up. Yeah, they're going to close Zoom. I mean, big deal. Some of the other things in the book that I thought were really good is that that success ripples outward, meaning that when you start having some success, you'll have more often because you figured it out. You saw the mountain one time. Now you know what the mountain looks like, but also the people around you are going to be better. And, so I feel like that success really does kind of rub off on other people. I see that. It's the energy. Like when I have the energy of, I just had a great sales call. I just really closed a deal with a new client that is a perfect fit for us. We're going to knock it out of the park for them. I'm super excited. Everybody else around me gets excited too.
Absolutely.
Couple others I think are really good from this book is like being decisive. You got to make the decision. And when the time is right, and you just go all in 100%. Don't you have to find there are a lot of unknowns. There are going to be details you don't know. Sometimes you just have to jump off a cliff. Get a good parachute. Make sure your parachute's as good as it can be. Do all of your due diligence that you can. Be as prepared as possible, but be ready to realize that the parachute might fail. So, but if you're going to get anywhere, you got to make the decision. You got to make the jump.
So, can I tell you what's funny about that?
Tell me.
Which is the work of sales is so different than the work of so many other people. And I would say lots of highly technical fields, right? And probably why it's hard to sell in some highly technical fields, because in some highly technical fields, right, that whole idea, which I think is the right idea for sales, like sometimes you just have to go and the parachute may not work, but you have to go, right? You have to jump, you have to do it.
Yep.
I just watched the Mars rover Perseverance land on Mars. Right?
My wife just watched that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's got a parachute on it. Right. And so it breaks through or goes through Mars's atmosphere. The parachute comes out, it slows it down. The heat shield drops. There's a secondary crane thing that lowers it down, and thrusters and all that. But so you're saying parachute. I was thinking about people like that, people working in scientific technical things where it's measure, not once or twice, or it's like measure 50 times, cut once, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the world of sales, right? The world of sales, now if you have a big presentation, you want to prepare and all the rest of that, but like eventually you got to get in the room, you got to talk, right? Somebody's ready, you got to get in the room and talk, even if you're not as ready as you want it to be. Sometimes that moment's going to come and you either take it and seize it and do the best you can, or you don't get it at all, right? Yeah. And I think of, professional athletes. You prepare, but then you get in the floor, you actually got to play, right? And you got to take the shots, and you're going to miss it. You're going to miss every shot you don't take, right?
Yeah, you do, and you got to be able to adjust and maintain your confidence on the fly. If you screw something up, you got to figure out a way to move forward in that situation. That's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. Yeah. You want to talk about the weather?
Oh my gosh, we've had such good weather in Oklahoma. I've been looking at, my weather app, and I've been comparing our weather to Cancun, and I've just been like, wow, we have such good weather compared to my coworkers in Florida and people who are visiting the Caribbean. No, our weather has been miserable.
Awful.
Right?
Yeah.
What day are we now with negative temperatures, right? We're on day 10. We're on day 10 or something.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, like beyond, like below freezing, I guess. It's a long time. Like, and we're not even as bad as Texas, man. Texas, I don't know if you saw one of the junior senator from Texas was on a plane to Cancun and got caught.
Yeah.
I'd be going to Cancun too. I don't blame him. I'd be on my way.
Right. I mean, your job isn't to be a public servant, so it's a little different, but yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think from like a weather, like an absolute, so this is what's interesting, from like an absolute weather standpoint, we have had it worse than Texas, but from a societal infrastructure failure standpoint, Texas is far worse, right? So they have, 4+ million people without power, either consistently or rolling. And a lot of the people I work with live in Texas. And so they have been, basically since Monday, offline, sometimes 20, 30, 50% of the time or more for a couple of them. Mm-hmm. And, waking up to 35 degrees in the house and no water and all the rest of that. So it has been rough. I heard from someone, heard a story earlier today of someone in the Houston area, right? They're inside of their house is, 30 degrees, but their car is 65. So they're sleeping in their car, right? And you're seeing lines of people in like public parks where there's faucets, where there's still water coming up, lining up to fill up coolers and things like that with water, which is something that you see, which I saw in person in sub-Saharan Africa, right? Of the community watering hole, where the one place that has safe water or maybe even not safe water, but you have to have water and everyone goes there to drink it, right? So it's been a very challenging environment the last 4 days to try to do business and conduct business and move anything really forward.
Yeah. I've got
Has
a buddy.
It impacted you?
I got a buddy. Well, it has. Yeah. So my friend, speaking of Texas, so my friend, I got a really good friend that lives in College Station. He's a muckety muck. He's a big guy at Texas A&M, runs a big department there. Super great guy. I was texting back. I've been texting with him the whole time. And there was a time there when they were doing the rolling blackouts because of really the energy grid issue where they would have power for maybe 15 or 30 minutes, and then they would be off for 3 or 4 hours. And then it would come back on for a few minutes and it would be off. And so, the main thing for me, the one concern, like we have not had it that bad. Fortunately, our electricity has not gone off at all. And, which is really amazing, even with the rolling blackouts that we had as part of our little, we're not on the Texas grid. But all of the cold has created a situation where, all these pipes are freezing. And so when we have a sprinkler system, we live in an apartment, and, when the sprinkler systems, when those heads or those, get frozen, it sets the alarm off. And so our fire alarm went off, not last night, but the night before, went off at 2:45 in the morning or something. And it stayed on for 30 minutes. The fire department has to come out in all the snow and turn it off, check out what's going on. And so yeah, there's been, and that, it's been stuff like that. We've kept our thermostat down. I mean, I'm rocking the scarf inside just because it's so cold, but I feel very fortunate, actually. I mean, I feel really fortunate and thankful, but even so, I definitely have been on edge more than, we've already been on edge because of COVID, and we're, that has changed our lives, everybody's lives just about. And then this on top of it, there's just the challenge of the really crazy extreme weather, plus, all the things that comes with it, with the alarms and the freezing pipes and all that stuff.
We get moved off of our routines, the things that we expect to happen don't happen. Yep. And, that's challenging. So especially when, you're already, like you said, we're already in, a year into a pandemic almost. Right. And we've set up a new normal. Right. And this is the coping new normal. Right. And then the coping new normal gets obliterated. Right. Yeah. So it's been hard, think about all of those people out there who are, trying to work and then have kids at home as well, which was the situation I was in earlier this week. A lot of folks in that same situation. Yeah. And you've got to, in my mind, just put your arms around folks and love on them and let them know that they're doing okay. They're doing the best they can, right? Yep. In a challenging year. This is a particularly challenging week.
Yeah. Life is hard, man.
Life is hard.
So isn't that like the first precept of Buddhism or something?
Life is suffering.
Life is suffering.
Yep, we talked about that recently. And yes, absolutely. And the acceptance of that is the first step towards enlightenment.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
So one thing I was thinking about and did the cursory amount of research on, I've read about this quite a bit in the past, is just how stress, which is a lot of the folks that we do business with, a lot of people that are in our communities are feeling a lot of stress because of this week and how it impacts decision making. And you mentioned irritability potentially, right? And I'm just kind of
so irritable right now. I'm so cranky. My wife just is like, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, Jake. Go to your room. So, yeah, it's tough.
Exactly. Right. And I'm feeling the same way. Right. Yeah, I'm feeling irritable. Right. And it's, my job to, you and I are both, right. We're the folks who are going out there trying to make friends with new people, right. Yep. Who want to trust us and do business with us. Right. Yep. So you have conversations with those folks. And man, I know I don't think I've slipped enormously this week, but I know I've definitely slipped this week. And reading about stress now, what it does is on your decision making is that it increases the likelihood that you're going to go for high risk, high reward type situations. And so, which can make you more impulsive to do things which are, riskier. Right. Yeah. And it also limits your ability to, appreciate how risky those high risk decisions are. Right. Yeah. And so you utilize a lot of short-term thinking as opposed to your longer-term thinking, right? Yeah. Because that you're activating, lower parts of your brain, more ancient parts of your brain, which are more impulsive and kind of crave your base desires versus your higher order thinking, long-term thinking of the prefrontal cortex. So
my wife calls that lizard brain.
Lizard brain, exactly. Yeah. I almost said lizard brain. Yes, that's exactly what it. Probably because she's an educator and child education terminology. That's a big part of what people talk about is the lizard brain. Yep. I don't know what they call the front brain. Is it the grown-up brain? Is it the smart brain?
I don't know.
Is it? I think it's.
We don't ever talk about that. That's the thing. It's always the lizard brain. The lizard brain's jumping up, making all the noise. So it's a lizard brain that gets all the attention. The good kid in the back never ever gets any attention.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, I mean, I'll be real interested. It'd be interesting to see the data. Like if you were able to pull data and if you were to say, hey, like every company in the world that sells something, that has salespeople in Oklahoma, Texas, like let's see what their chart looks like for an average week in February, and then let's see what it looks like this week. Right. How does sales in Oklahoma, Texas compare to people who are in, Florida right now? Right. I'm guessing not great.
Yeah.
Not just because of the power and access issues, right? For the rest of it as well. Yeah.
It's all that stuff. I mean, the power and the everything. I mean, there's a psychological thing. I definitely feel like I've been off my game this week. I've had three or four substantial kind of sales-ish calls. And I didn't feel like on my game on all of them. I don't know why. Not one of them. I think it was just that. I think it was operating in a really less than ideal situation.
Reptilian, you might say.
Oh yeah, reptilian. That's great. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, I've got so kind of maybe taking that one step further, in a different direction, but related. I'm curious about as a salesperson, what experiences that you've had of people selling to you, and I'm curious about any just bad buying experiences you've had where you've had a salesperson interact with you that just like you're like, no, this isn't how you do it.
Yeah, I actually had one fairly recently, and it's and it's not a, it wasn't a buying experience because we didn't buy. I didn't buy, but no, the most recent one that I had, the one that comes to mind that was just really kind of a tough experience was it really seemed like it started out as an interrogation. I had accepted a cold call. I had got taken an appointment from a cold call. This salesperson, who I think frankly is a talented and skilled salesperson, is just something just wasn't quite right, because it was, I'm trying to get, like I told the salesperson up front, we don't really know much about your business. Like, we don't know what you do. And so can you give me like the 5-minute, like, this is what you do? And so she talked for a minute or two, but then immediately got into like, it was what felt like an interrogation. It was like she had this list that she was going down. It was like, okay, she went through the qualification list, basically, how many of this, what of that? When do you do that? What's the, there was probably, we got to like question 8 or 10 or something. And I was like, hold on, I didn't know, like, I'm not telling you my company's like, gross revenue right now. Like, it's privately held. Like, I'm not telling you that. I don't know who you are, So I kind of think that like that was the most recent one. And I don't want to say anymore because I don't want to give away who it is. And this person does not deserve, I feel like, to take any, guff because of a one bad call. I probably had as bad of a call as the sales guy this week because of how crummy things have been, just like we're talking about before. So, but that's the most recent kind of just bad experience. It was, there's, no listening. Like, I'm asking for something and it's like, nope, we're going to plow ahead with my agenda. It's like,
yeah. Well, and so it didn't seem, so from what you've said, it doesn't sound like there was a lot of bonding or rapport that happened initially. Right.
Yep.
And it was a cold call. So it's hard on a cold call to match a mirror and understand where the other person's at.
Sure.
But still, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of validation or understanding of what your particular pain points were.
Yeah. We talk a lot about in this kind of the way that we sell, the methodology of sales that we use in my organization. We talk a lot about give and take. And so any kind of sales call really needs to have a give and take. It's I do need a little bit of information from the prospect to know where we're going to go next. But when they give me that information, I oftentimes can take that and there's something that triggers in my mind. It's like, oh, okay, that I get that. Okay. So just in a situation like this, oftentimes what we would do is this. And so that's an insight that I'm giving them for free, just value. If you don't buy from me, that's fine. But you have already gained something, a piece of information that's helpful to what you're trying to make happen. In any opportunity in that give and take, like get another, so we continue on, 2 more questions later, we're kind of exploring a particular topic. Something comes up, I'm like, oh, okay. Just so you know, normally how that works is ding, ding, ding. And I'll send this to you. Like, I'm taking notes because I'm going to email this to him afterwards. Like, here's all the actionable things that I told you about in this, like, in our call. Here's the recap of that. And so that oftentimes is really helpful because that reminds them, hey, these are all the things that this guy just literally took a 30-minute call. Didn't even pay him any money. And I've got some direction to take this thing. So I think that give and take is really helpful. Even when you can't give as much, like you can't really just you're not, as a salesperson, maybe you're not the top of the expertise. I still think that it's important as a salesperson to learn the most common things, the points that come up in sales calls, so you can provide that kind of value to someone who doesn't have the expertise that your organization has.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about as you're telling that story is, talking about bonding rapport happens up front. You're trying to match a mirror, right? You're trying to go with where they're going. Sometimes it's really hard to sell to really direct, intense personality styles that know what they want, right? And so they don't want to do any of that. They want to jump right to the checklist, right? They want to jump right in, and they're going to tell you about the services, and they've got their own checklist that they're going to run through for you. And you're just like, yes, here's the answer to all the check boxes, right? And what's interesting is that I found really a big transformation with some of, the clients that I work with is, sometimes you have to go through that a little bit with someone, but then always try to drop in some of the deepening of the relationship, the bonding rapport.
Yep.
And you want to do it right up front, but sometimes for them, the best way to take care of them is to help them understand how you can take care of their business problem, right?
Yeah.
Not that it's the only thing you're going to do ever, right?
Right.
But I've just noticed with some of my more direct style clients that, man, for a while you have to play a little bit in that mode until you can really massage it into a real like working relationship.
Yeah.
And then once you do, then whole new avenues and doors and opportunities open, which is what's happened.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's that's my consistent with my experience as well.
That is okay. Awesome. Because I never know, right? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Right.
Right.
It's probably kind of what we talked about earlier. Sometimes you just have to go. You have to try.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what's working. So I'm going to do more of it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you had any bad experiences that you want to share as a seller?
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. So the one that immediately comes to mind was pretty early on in my career. I was selling radio ads, and I've told you before, not the best product. I really prefer what I'm selling now better, but it has its place, and it's valuable. It has its place, but it didn't fit me that well. Anyway, but we were in this, and it was a store, like a little store of some kind. We're talking to the owner, and there was a senior salesperson with me because I was like a year or two in, and so I still needed a little bit of help every once in a while. And so the senior sales guy came with me. We're sitting in this guy's office. We're kind of we're asking, kind of getting things going, and talking to him, kind of understanding what his needs are, kind of what's going on with his business. And one of the things I noticed in the meeting is that, and it was a little off-putting to me, is like the dude would not look me in the eye. Like he would not look me in the eye. Didn't make eye contact with me or the other guy that I was there with. And so it was kind of a weird thing. Sure. And we got through, and it was clear he wasn't a good prospect for us, but we said our niceties. I stood up to leave, and he stood up as well. And I reached my hand out to shake his hand, and he just stood there. He wouldn't shake my hand. Dude would not take my hand. Like, he wouldn't look me in the eye. He wouldn't shake my hand. And as we were walking out, I'm starting to get pissed, because that to me is a sign of disrespect. If you don't want to shake my hand because, you're afraid of germs or something, just tell me, but look me in the eye. Come on, and then I started going through my head, like, okay, maybe there's something going on there neurologically, and I need that, and I mentioned it as we got in the car and we're driving away, I mentioned it to the sales guy I was with, the senior guy. And I'm like, hey, it was really weird that he wouldn't look me in the eye or shake my hand. And he was like, Jake, are you a moron? He's blind. I didn't know. I couldn't tell. And he's like, there was a cane in the corner of his office, white and red. The guy was blind.
There was a seeing eye dog on his lap, and it said seeing eye dog in his tag.
Like, no. Yeah. No. And so that was when I really realized, I'm like, okay, so if I'm going to be successful in this, I'm going to have to be more perceptive. I got
just a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a great story.
What about you? Are you going to do you want to talk about? I mean, do you have worst experiences buyer and seller? I'd love to hear this.
I've got a lot of great stories about how bad I have been at sales at different times. I'll tell one story. So from my fundraising career, so I spent about 6 years as a fundraiser, and initially, kind of the first fundraising job I had lots of like presentation style asks, right? It didn't have a lot of direct one-on-one asks, so I didn't really have a lot of muscle memory in that. My second job, I really was like running fundraising for a nonprofit, and so one of the annual things that I would do is we would have a dinner. You go and ask all the board members and other select people to, sponsor a table at your event, right? It's $1,000, and you go up and here's the card and fill it out and a table name, who's in, right? So there's all this logistics around it. And I'm really, really good at teaching the board members how to do it precisely. But sometimes I would just get nerves and I would get intimidated, especially by a particular board member who I, maybe didn't know as well, didn't have a great relationship with. And so we set up one of these meetings to go down and visit a board member. We meet him at Olive Garden in Norman, right? We sit down at the table. I think it was Olive Garden. We sit down at the table. I've got, the envelope, right? The envelope with the ask card and the description of the table levels, right? And all of that. And, we said, well, I think we know why we're here. We're trying to make sure we get, sponsors for our event. And they're like, yeah. I got it. And then we have a nice conversation about a million other things. We hand them the card. We say, thanks a lot. And then I keep waiting for that card to come back. And I keep waiting and waiting. And I realize I never actually asked if he would do it. I just assumed that he would, right? And I never said, so just to make sure we're clear, these are the options, these are the levels. What level would you feel most comfortable at? And if the event were tomorrow, which one of these levels do you think it would be? And okay, great. How would you like us to do this? Would you like us to send you an invoice? Are you going to send a check, right? But I just failed on the actual ask itself. I just danced around the ask, right? Yeah. Which is funny because other board members, I would say, hey, we need $100,000 for this. And they would say yes, right? But I didn't have that level of rapport, relationship building. Yeah. And it just goes to show part of it's about just getting out there and doing it, but part of it's also doing the prep work so that you've got the relationship, that you've got the standing, you feel comfortable doing it, right? Yeah. So that was one of my many sales faux pas.
I know. I think that's harder. I honestly think that I feel like selling like sponsorships for nonprofit events. Like I've been on a couple of nonprofit boards. I'm on one right now as president of a nonprofit. And so we've done these kinds of events and I feel like that sell is actually more difficult because you're not solving the person's problem. You're asking someone to write the check to solve somebody else's problem. Which, I mean, come on, that's, I'm a realist. I give money to charity. Our company sponsors stuff, but I'm going to spend a whole lot more money that's on something that solves my business problem than something that solves somebody else's problem. Call me selfish, but that's just seems to be how the world is. So I think that's a hard sell. I mean, it's a hard sell.
In some ways it really is. And I honestly think, if I were ever to go back to being a fundraiser now, having done this world of enterprise software sales, I would be so much more bold in what I would go out and ask for, right? Because I have such a better idea of, companies and budgets and what's possible and feasible and all the rest of that. Man, I would be so much more bold. I'd be so much better at it. Now, maybe I'd be worse. Maybe I'd be more bold and I'd piss people off. Maybe I was the right amount of not bold before, but yeah, I don't think I would hesitate nearly as much as I, hesitated then.
Yeah. Yeah. What about for you as a buyer? Have you been in any situation that you would like to talk about as a buyer where it was just like oh my gosh, what a terrible buying experience?
What's funny is that I've had some really bad used car buying experiences,
That's not stereotypical or anything.
It's not stereotypical, but it's true.
No, it is stereotypical. I'm being facetious.
Yeah. Well, but the funny thing is when you compare it to a really good, like I've had also really good car buying experiences. Yeah. I mean, I've bought several used cars. I bought a new car and in my past. And so I've had a number of experiences and, the worst is, when you're trying to leave the building and the person basically tries, and I didn't know what was happening the first time, so I fell for it. Well, let me actually introduce you to my sales manager, right? Yeah. So you're like, no, I just wanted to see this car and I wanted to drive it and I wanted to get a sense of what it's like. And no, I'm good. I'm leaving. I'm out the door. Yeah. And oh, no. Let me, and you're shaking the hand and the subtle pull. Let me introduce you to Bill, the sales manager. And the first time I sat down and he pulls out a piece of paper and he's like, if I can get that number, and he draws a line on it, puts an X on it, would you sign today? And I'm like, what is happening? Like, why is this happening? Like, I'm trying to leave.
I hate that stuff.
Yeah. The second time it happened, I just walked out. I said, no, goodbye. And I walked out.
Yeah. I walked out. I walked out of an F&I guy's office once. We had already kind of, hey, this is what I want. And I already had my fundings. Like I was just going to write it. I had a check ready to go. And they really, really, really wanted to were really wanting to, gotta let me finance it, get you a better deal. I'm like, no, I'm good. No, I'm really good. I'm set. This is I'm good to go. I got the check ready to go. How much is what's the total after all your, destination fees and stuff. And it was like, no, you can't do that, man. They literally wouldn't take my money. And so I got up and walked out. Yeah. And that didn't end well. I didn't end up buying it.
Didn't end well for them. Ended great for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't ideal. I would have loved to have made bought the first car. Yeah. But I don't know. I think the thing with those guys, you have to just be really kind of blunt no, I'm not, I'm good. Thank you. Those guys, that's a hard business though. And I feel like I get why automobile sales guys can be aggressive and can come off that way. Just because like it is a tough business. And if those guys don't sell, they don't eat, like just like you and me,
Right.
But it's just a harder, like they don't have really any control over the product,
right.
No control.
Right.
And
exactly.
so it is what it is. And
right. Yep.
But that's that's really a crappy buying experience though, Mike. I hate that. I hate that whole like, well, let's get you the next person and let's go through that's a gimmick,
It is a gimmick.
Did they do they did like the quadrants, the 4 quadrants?
I don't think they did the 4 quadrants. I'll tell you another fun. Oh man, can I tell you a proud moment of a buying experience for me in a used car situation?
Yes.
So the current car I drive now, I went in and I've been searching for this particular kind of car for a while. Found a really, really good price. I was kind of staying on top of this kind of car in my cars.com app, and I see it. I'm like, yep, this is my car. I test drive it once. I'm loving it. I go back, I work out my financing, right? I come back, I test drive it again, and the price on the car was great, but the price on the trade-in was terrible. And I had intentionally brought a USB cable from my car that I drove in there, and I left it in the car I was test driving, right? And I plug in my phone and test all those features, make sure they work, right? So then we go back and we're haggling over the price of the trade-in, and they're like, this is the best we can do. This is already way above. And I'm like, here's the Kelly Blue Book. You're not even close, right? This isn't going to work. He's like, no. Well, that's, and I'm like, okay, fine. Why don't you go get the USB cable out of the car? And then they go back and they get the USB cable of the car and they come back. And then by the time they go do all that, because that was my signal that it's not working, they're like, okay, we can do it.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, people got to make money. You got to make a margin. You get to make a commission if you sell something, but just don't rip me off.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. I gotcha. Well, cool, man. I can't believe we've gone an hour.
This is an hour?
It's an hour. Man. Can you believe that? I think we started at, no, maybe not. Maybe it's not an hour yet.
It's pretty close. But, with how crazy this week was, this might have been the most fun hour I've had all week.
Me too. Because I've been I have not done, normally we talk about what cocktail we're drinking, and neither one of us are really doing that, because it's you don't know when you're going to have to rush out of your home with all your belongings and your kids and everything because, right. The pipes are burst or whatever.
Better put on the ski gear and walk down to the hotel.
Seriously. I'm sleeping in a jumpsuit. Jump up at 3 a.m. and get out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Jake,
hey,
always a pleasure and
truly
so much fun.
Oh my gosh, you too. Just for people that don't know, this is the Talky podcast where we talk. Obviously, we talk about the worlds of sales, marketing, technology, business strategy, entrepreneurship, how they interact. The website's talkytalkypod.com and everywhere that the finest podcasts are consumed. So if you want to learn more about Mike, or you want to reach out to Mike, I actually think you can do that through LinkedIn. It's going to be linkedin.com/in/Slack Mike. For me, the best way is Twitter. Tweet at me. It's at Jake Fisher, JakeFisher. Mike, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you, sir.
I'll see you in a week.
Bye.